All right, so driver qualification files, not fun, but not as bad as you think at the same time. And this video really is just to help you use this spreadsheet and manage them on your own. I'm not going to go into too much detail about every little thing that goes into a DQ file, but I'll definitely run through everything and do my best to just kind of give you a high level overview of what goes into it. The main thing is this spreadsheet, it tracks expiration dates for you. So if you've got a document that is going to expire within the month, it'll turn yellow. And if it'll within the week, it'll turn orange. And then if it's actually expired, it'll turn red. So that's cool because you can, once you set these files up, which takes some work, but once you got them set up, you really only have to check in on them every 2, 3, 4 weeks. Just make sure nothing's turning yellow or orange, and then just put it aside and then get back to doing whatever it is you'd rather be doing than managing DQ files. I'm sure that's a long list. So yeah, we're just going to run through this. If you want this file, go to trainmydrivers.com and go to compliance and then just download it. It's totally free. You can share it. Just use it. It's good. It'll help. I wish I had this when I was a new safety manager. All right, so first thing you might be asking is, all right, well, who actually needs a DQ file? And definitely your CDL drivers, which there's a tab down here. And then your non-CDL drivers need one as well, provided that they're in, a commercial motor vehicle. And so really the easiest way to think about this is if whatever truck they're driving has a gross vehicle weight rating of more than 10,000 and you're doing business, it's a commercial vehicle. That's the easiest way to think about it. So that's, some of your F-250s, definitely the 350s, 450s on up, they're all considered commercial vehicles. So it's a lot. It's a lot of people that you might not suspect need a DQ file. But the good news is for your non-CDL people, there's a lot less that you have to put into their file because they don't have the same requirements for the drug and alcohol testing that the CDL guys do. So it's a little bit easier. It's a lot easier there. All right, this tab here for CDL drivers, I've got 15 columns in there that you can use. If you needed to add more, don't copy and paste them. Just duplicate this tab down here and then just label it, 16 through 30 or whatever. And that'll be a lot better. In general, avoid copying and pasting things on this spreadsheet just because there's specific formatting in here that starts getting moved around and you don't want that. I want these these cells that turn yellow and orange and red. I want them to keep doing that. And the best way is to just avoid copying and pasting. So, but anyway, there's 15 drivers on this page. Non-CDL has, I think, 10. But yeah, let's get into this. So, okay, your driver list runs left to right, driver 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then as you work your way down, you get all the little bits of information that you need to be keeping in their file. Now, the spreadsheet really is, it's just the way for you to track everything. You still need to have a folder that you put all their stuff into, like the copy of their driver's license and their medical card and consent forms and job application, and all those things need to be kept in that folder. But as far as like tracking it, that's what this is for. So, okay, so what we'll do, we'll run down like as if we're hiring a new driver. All right, so Sally Semi comes to us and she wants a job. And even though we don't know if we're going to hire her yet, we're going to go ahead and start making a driver qualification file for her because quite honestly, most of what goes into the DQ file is stuff that you do when you onboard them. So to keep track of things, you got, all right, her name and her date of birth and the driver's license number, the state of issuance, what class it is, any endorsements, any restrictions, expiration, and then phone number and email. Obviously, when you enter this in, it'll notify you if it's going to expire just by turning yellow when it's a month out. in which case you'd go ahead and just call her, send her an email, and let her know, hey, you're about to expire. Let's get ahead of that. So it's all super easy right there. And then we're going to move down a little bit further. All right, now we need a copy of her medical card, and then you put in the date that it expires. And then same thing here, it'll change whenever it's coming up to be due. And right here, you can see medical examiner verified in registry. So all that is, just click on this link a couple times till it works. And then it's going to open up the page where you can find the medical examiner. And you can do an advanced search and search for the examiner's registry number, business name, first name, last name. You can go by zip code, whatever, but you need to verify that they're legit, and this is how you do it. So that's easy enough. Okay, and so then here we're just showing, did they complete the application? Now you might have an application for employment, like on your website, something they can just kind of enter some information in, or maybe you've got a paper one that you use kind of for all your people, but you need to have one that is specific for your drivers that they fill out. So that's why we've got a yes or no here, just so that you know, okay, they've actually filled out the proper application. And the reason is on that application, you have to have certain pre-employment history requirements, and you've got to have, certain questions about, were they working in a safety sensitive environment? Like were they regulated by the DOT or FMCSA? You can actually get kind of a generic copy of a job application on the FMCSA's website. There's a lot of good resources on the FMCSA's website. Kind of hard to find sometimes, but it's there. And so anyway, proper job application completed. Yes. And then you can extend a conditional job offer. And that is contingent upon them passing all the background check and the drug test and the road test. And their actual hire date will go here when that time comes. And then this one here is, we've got no attempts made. That's for the inquiry to previous employers, 3 documented attempts. Now you can pay someone else to do that for you. There's background check services that do it, like HireRight, Checker. There's a handful of them out there, and ranging from $30 to $50 to do. Probably the easiest way to go about it, but you can also just make your 3 documented attempts at contacting the previous employers to get their employment history and any records of drug and alcohol violations. You definitely need your driver's consent before doing that. Basically, when they fill out the job application, you just want to go ahead and hit them with all the consent forms at the same time. But anyway, 3 reasonable attempts at getting their employment history, and it's worth doing. It's worth knowing what they've been up to. All right, so moving right along, we get into the drug and alcohol stuff. There's quite a bit here. There's like 7 different things. And if we pop over to the non-CDL side, there's 4 different things. And that's really only if you're going to be enrolling them in a random drug testing pool. So that's where the non-CDL side is a whole lot easier to manage. But let's get into some of these things here. The first is the pre-employment drug and alcohol questionnaire. It's just 2 questions. It's in the last 5 years, it's either 3 or 5. The last 5 years, have you ever failed a DOT drug or alcohol test? And if the answer is yes, have you finished the return to duty process? If you don't know what the return to duty process is, I'll tell you about that in just a second. But anyway, it's just 2 questions. You can add more if you want, but you only need to have 2. Second thing you want to do is, because right there might be like, okay, well, I'm not going to hire you. If you failed a drug screen, I'm not going to hire you. And if you're going to lie about it, I'm going to catch that too. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that's up to you. So next thing is the drug and alcohol training materials and the company policy reviewed and signed. So there's this kind of a whopper here. You need to have a clear company policy regarding drug and alcohol, and they need to know what their rights are. They need to know what the federal requirements are, state requirements, and they need to know what your company's policy is. And your company can have whatever policy it wants as long as it's within the letter of the law. So let's say, for instance, you've got a guy that gets popped for a random and he fails. Okay, well, there's a thing called the return to duty process where they go to a substance abuse professional, and that professional does an assessment on their psyche and their history and makes a determination of how much counseling they need to go through. And then there's a series of follow-up drug tests over the course of the next year. And that's a whole process. And it might cost $1,000, $2,000 or more, just depending on who your SAP is and how many tests there are and where you're getting the test done. So it can be an expensive process. Not to mention there's the liability of, so let me backtrack. In that policy, you want to make clear, okay, if this guy fails this drug test, what are we going to do with him? Are we going to fire him, or are we just going to remove him from safety sensitive work? So you might not want to fire the person, but you want to keep them from driving your trucks. And you need to have that outlined in your policy, and so that they know it and so that you know it. And the other thing is that I just kind of want to point out while I'm thinking about it is, as far as the substance abuse professional goes, you're required as the employer to provide them with a list of the substance abuse professionals that are near them. And that's easy to find. There's a list. Quick Google search, you'll get a list of people that are around you. But that's all you're required to do. You don't have to pay for them to go through the rehabilitation program. You don't have to pay for that. You don't have to pay for their drug screens and all that stuff. You could put it in your policy that if they go through the return to duty process and they pay for it and they complete it, that you may hire them back and allow them to drive your equipment. But you're by no means obligated to do so. If you just want to terminate them and then just gone forever, that's cool too. Just make sure that all that stuff is in your policy. Okay, next thing is the clearinghouse consent. So this one's pretty straightforward. You just need to get them to sign. They can do it digitally or on paper. You need to get them to sign and give their consent for you to run a query in the clearinghouse. If you don't know what the clearinghouse is, very briefly, I'll tell you it's a database of failed drug tests, and everyone kind of has their part to play in it. The driver has to be enrolled, the employer has to be enrolled, the medical review officers have to be enrolled, and basically anytime one of your drivers fails a drug test, the medical review officer is going to report that into the clearinghouse. And that way, let's say you fire that person and they go to work for another company down the road, they're going to run a clearinghouse query on that driver, and they're going to see, he failed a drug test, so I'm not going to hire this guy. So that's how that works. It used to be like, so if I go back, if you look at the inquiry to previous employers, it used to be that was the only way that you had to know that someone had failed a drug test. You had to call their old place of work and ask them. If they go out of business, what are you going to do? If they don't answer, what are you going to do? You just don't know. So you might have someone all methed out driving down the road and have no way of knowing other than like a random test that has to be random. There are reasonable suspicion tests, but that's a whole different thing. So point is, this drug and alcohol clearinghouse is actually kind of cool, a little more work for everybody, but it makes it so that you as the employer have less risk of hiring someone that has a drug or alcohol problem. So get their written consent, pre-employment drug screen status, negative or passed. So basically we're going to take care of all this stuff. We're going to run the query in the clearinghouse, make sure that they never failed any drug tests in the past. And only then are we going to go, all right, well, now I'm going to pay for the drug screen, for the pre-employment drug screen. So then you send them off for the drug screen. Make sure you get a negative result before you let them drive your trucks. and then add them to your consortium. That's your random drug testing pool. If you don't have a random drug testing pool, you should get one. We can manage that for you. If you need some help with it, go to trainmydrivers.com and we'll be happy to get you started. And then the only other thing in here is the annual Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse limited query. And all that is just that once a year, you've got to query that system for all of your CDL drivers and make sure that there's no failed drug tests on their report. All right, so you might ask yourself, if this person's been working for me for the last year, why do I need to run another query on them? Because if they failed, I would know because I'm the one sending them off for randoms. And it's really just if they had a second job that they didn't tell you about and failed to test with them. So then it would show up. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, I run them once a year. They're like $1.20, I forget, $1.25, $2.25. They're not expensive. And again, we can help you with that stuff too. All right, so getting close to the end. Consent for MVR checks. Get the written consent on paper. Depends on the state. Rule of thumb, get it in ink on paper. And then run their MVR check. Do it through the state website. It's going to be the cheapest. There are plenty of options out there, online services that will run not just MVR checks, but background checks, pre-employment checks, all that stuff. I think I mentioned Checker earlier. They'll do it. HireRight is a good one. So get their consent and then run it. And then annual review of driving record. That's the only ongoing thing. Yep. So once a year, just make sure that you pull another MVR. You've already got their consent to do it, so you're good to go. Just pull it annually, review it, make sure that it fits inside the confines of whatever your insurance will permit or whatever your company policy is, if that's more stringent than your insurance. And that's it for the MVR stuff. All right, and the last thing here is the hours of service record completed and the road test completed and documented. Okay, so hours of service. Non-CDL drivers and CDL drivers are both required to, not necessarily to maintain an hours of service record, because it's not that simple, but they're required to comply with the hours of service regulations. Now, CDL truck drivers, they used to run paper logs, and some of them still do run paper logs, and now there's electronic logging devices that track those hours. And if you have an electronic logging device in your truck, that software should be set up so that the first time they get in there, they're going to enter their previous 7 days of on-duty time, because a DOT officer always wants to know what are you doing right now and what have you been doing for the last week. And so that's why there's always this previous 7 days thing. Okay, so again, if you have an ELD in your truck, that's going to take care of it for you. I always just get that information anyway from the jump. I just have them write it down on this sheet of paper. It's the previous 7 days and yada yada, and then I know what they've been up to, and I've got the record because I need to keep the record. I'm the employer. They need to keep the record too if they're not a local driver. But if they are a local driver, they're still required to follow the regulations, but they don't have to keep a record of duty status. They don't need an electronic log. They don't need a paper log. But you, as the carrier, as the company, you are required to know and document their hours of service. And it's easy enough with a local company. You can use your time cards, you could use payroll, whatever. But on that initial, so most people can kind of piece something together. If they get an audit or something, they can go, well, this is what he worked. And it works out, because unless they're working more than 70 hours a week, you're usually fine. And as long as they're not working more than 14 hours per day, you're usually fine. But you gotta have that previous 7 days before they started working for you, okay? All right, last thing here is the road test completed and documented. CDL drivers don't necessarily have to have a road test. The regulations say that if they've got a CDL, you can use that in lieu of a road test, presumably because they've been tested by the state, I guess. Most companies still road test their CDL drivers just as a precaution, and that's the way to do it. Like road test your CDL drivers. You never know what you might find. Now your non-CDL drivers, different story. They do need to be road tested because they don't have a CDL. So you kind of need to have someone at your company that is going to be your designated road tester. And once they've gone through all this process and you're like, all right, cool, I think we're ready to get this guy driving, get that road test done, make sure it's documented, make sure it's done by somebody that isn't a knucklehead, and then you're good to go. And you got everything you need. So yeah, there is a lot going on here for sure, but it's all important stuff, if you think about it. And having it all in one place is the move, and the spreadsheet can definitely help you out with that. So download it and let me know if it does something weird, or if there's something that it doesn't have on it that you think it should. Let me know. Send me an email, and I can make it better. And then yeah, on that same note, like everything that I've been talking about here, we can help with all of this stuff if you need it. If it's really anything here, we can help you do. We can help you do it. We can teach you how to do it, or we can do it for you. But you know what? If you just do it one step at a time, it's not that bad. This first section here is all easy stuff. The medical card and, verifying on the registry, easy, just one click. Job application, you want to have a good job application. That's worth poking around. I can send you a template that you could work off of. Just send me an email. I'll send it to you. Really, any of this stuff, I've got some things that I can send you that you can use, like the pre-employment drug and alcohol questionnaire, consent forms, consent for MVR checks, hours of service record. I can give you something you can use. It's just let me know if you need this stuff. So as you're going through this, if you come across some things or you've got some specific questions, just send me an email or book a call through the website, and you got 30 minutes on the house. I'll share with you whatever documents you need to kind of finish all this up. And yeah, hopefully this makes everything a whole lot easier for you. We do manage drug and alcohol programs, and we can definitely save you some money on that because we don't charge per driver, we charge per test. So if you've got 20 drivers, a lot of companies will charge you, a management rate and then a certain amount, like $100 per driver, but we only charge you for each of the random tests that get pulled. So it's usually going to be about half of your total amount of drivers. So you can save some money that way. Just, we're not going to bill you for stuff that you're not using. Oh, and I wanted to mention CDL driver training. So we go on site, we travel and do CDL training like at your location using your equipment. And we can't do it in all states though, like looking at you, Illinois. But we do have a train the trainer program, so that if you wanted to provide CDL training for your employees on the job, we have a train the trainer and certification program where we come out to you for a day, work with your trainers, give them everything that they need to effectively teach entry-level driver training. We help the company cut through the red tape, make sure your curriculum is compliant with the FMCSA and the state. So some people find that helpful. But yeah, like I said, anything with this DQ file, if you've got any specific questions, just get a hold of me and I'd be happy to help you out.